All right, I think I'm live again. There we go. Sorry, just need my computer. But yeah, wow, it's been a little bit. It's been a couple weeks. Last time I was here, last time I went live, we talked about humanizing the various instruments and how that can be a very tedious, very kind of like mind-numbing, slow process to watch. So what we did was I showed the basics of what I was going to do, how I was going to add some, I was going to humanize some of the velocities using a randomness factor, how I was going to add some expression and some modulation to each of the voices, as you can see here in those rising shapes, to help, again, give it a little more life. So now we've got, basically everything sounds a little more human. This is not the final mix. I will say that. All right. So not everything is balanced the way that it will be when we're done, but we've got everything sounding a little more realistic. We got the transitions a little smoother. So the last thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add some percussion, and we're going to want to add. So yeah, let's see. What was it? Percussion. And then after the percussion, we can just kind of like start mixing it. So today's focus will be on adding percussion instruments. We're going to start with some staples. We'll start with the bass drum, timpani, and cymbals, which are they're almost like the bread and butter percussion instruments of the orchestra. Then from there, we'll just kind of figure out what we want to do. I'll talk about the 7 traditional roles that percussion instruments typically play in an orchestral setting. And yeah. So as usual, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat. And yeah, for now, let's start. Let's listen to it real quick. All right, let's listen to it real quick. And then after we're done listening, we'll work on it for a little bit. And then, I don't know. I feel like whenever there's a good point, I'll make the announcement of what big project I'm going to be working on soon. But first, let's just get started. All right. All right. There we go. That's pretty much kind of the looping point. A couple things that I can already know right off the bat I want to change. At A3, the brass doesn't come in as heavy as I would like it to. We got this going on, and then at the moment it just feels kind of anticlimactic. I know I have the instruments there. They're just not balanced as well. I've got the horns, I've got trumpet, I've got trombones and tuba. Maybe I'll add a bass trombone. So there's little things I'll add here and there. Again, I'll probably do that once we get more to the mixing stage. Maybe add some today. And then at the end, I suddenly don't like how it continues in the same melodic voice and just staying in strings. I feel like the strings have the melody a lot throughout this piece. But these are all things that we can change. These are all things that we can adjust as we go. But today's focus is going to be on adding percussion instruments. So we'll be going section by section, and we'll be just doing exactly that. We'll be starting with the introduction and adding percussion instruments. Before I dive into that, though, I'll make that announcement now. All right, so I am going to be working on another project for this channel. I'm going to be writing another book and/or making a class. I don't know which one it's going to be, but recently, in a discussion with a friend of mine, I got asked the question if I were able to teach a class, or if I were to provide a resource to take someone who's never written music before and walk them through every single step, everything that they need to learn to know how to write music, how would I do it? And it was just kind of a fun conversation, but that ended up turning into a larger idea. And so I came up with this idea of focusing on a book or class, I don't know what it's going to be yet, but breaking it into 3 parts, where part 1 really focuses on the music theory that I think is most useful for composers to work with. Because you don't need to know music theory to write music. Of course you don't. But it's like trying to write poetry in a language that you don't understand. All right, it's perfectly possible. You can do it and no one can tell you not to. But it's going to be a lot easier to convey everything that you want to portray in your poem if you understand the language. All right. Then I was thinking about part 2, talking about structure and actual process for composing, and then 3, going into the basics of orchestration. So right now I have everything outlined from I think about 17 different chapters or lessons or whatever this is going to be, breaking down every one, building off the last one to really turn into an actual manual on how to write music. So this is a project I'm going to be working on. I figured I'd share it now. It's still very early in the early stages, but I'm excited about it. I hope you can be excited about it. And I'll definitely be keeping everybody updated as I continue to work on it. So that's the announcement. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them below. If not, that's fine. You're welcome to come and go as you please. For now, let's get started adding percussion to this track. All right, so as I mentioned before, why did I only add 1? I should have added 3. There are 3 instruments that are pretty much bread and butter of orchestration. Percussion, sorry. We've got the timpani, which is typically played by a dedicated player. It is considered very bad manners, very poor etiquette to ask the timpani player to play other instruments, all right? They will very rarely do it. It's almost like asking a trombone player to play the flute because they're both wind instruments. Of course, in other bands, so like high school bands and stuff like that, it might very well be different. But in a professional setting, the timpani player is the timpani player, not a percussionist. All right, but then we've got the bass drum. And then we have the cymbal. All right, so each of these has some fairly typical idiomatic roles that they like to play. All right, and I'll write them out here for you real quick. All right, so first, let's review. Percussion instruments in general have 7 common roles of the percussion section. All right, so you have doubling for color. You have ostinati, like playing rhythmic parts. You have extreme dynamics, because the percussion family has the loudest and quietest dynamics available to you in the orchestration. You have solo statements, where they play something that no one else is playing. You have builds, or we'll do that in a second. It's harmonic support, builds and climaxes, and then finally highlighting accents, or basically like applying accents to the music. So these are the 7 traditional roles of the orchestra. And basically, we'll go through each of these roles and figure out where we think they can fit well in this music. Now, I did mention that there are 3 percussion instruments where there's a lot of variety, and really the limit to what you're going to use with your percussion is really only limited by your imagination and how many players you have available. Or if you're using a DAW like I am right now, it doesn't matter how many players you have. They can play as many as you need to. But there are three most common orchestral percussion instruments. All right, you have the bass drum, which is used very frequently for accents and rolls. Those are the two, like brrr type thing on a bass drum. So it's basically for hitting accents, hitting strong beats, strong moments in the music, and providing kind of like a build into a climax to a nice rumbling, thundering kind of crescendo. All right, then the timpani, which is very frequently used for simplified bass line. So it'll play the bass line, but just stick to a couple notes because the timpani is limited in its range and how quickly and reliably you can expect the player to switch the notes that they are playing. So simplified bass lines, accents, rolls, and really just any rhythmic roll that you want. The bass drum is a little more difficult to do fast rhythmic parts just because it has such a big fat sound. All right, it has it's a slow moving instrument. It has a lot of presence to it, and so if you try to go too quickly with a symphonic bass drum, I should emphasize, not a drum kit, but a symphonic bass drum will get really muddy very quickly if you try to go too quickly with it, too fast with it. So it'll focus on accents. The timpani, on the other hand, can go much quicker. It has a sharper, quicker decaying sound than the bass drum. A tighter sound, I should say. And then the cymbals, there are two kinds. You have the suspended cymbal and you have the crash cymbal. It has three traditional rolls that are very common in pretty much every piece of orchestral music. You have rolls / crescendos. You have accents. Again, those two jobs being very common across each of these three instruments. And then you have special effects through scraping it with like a triangle beater, through bowing it with a cello's bow or a violin's bow or something like that. But so this is where we're going to start. These are the most frequently used techniques in the orchestra for percussion. So I'm going to move these off to the side so I can remember them. Or I'll bring them up here for a little bit just so you can take more notes if you need to. We'll start with the bass drum. We'll go through each section by section, figuring out where we think it should have accents, where it should have rolls. We can go through the timpani. I already got an idea in mind where I want the timpani to show up. Cymbals and rolls and crescendos, stuff like that. We'll go through each of these jobs and find out where we can fit them. Nikki, that sounds really interesting and exciting. Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, I'm very excited about the project. I think it'll be really fun. I love writing. I love sharing the things I know. And like I said, I still got to figure out if I want to do it as an online class like Evident, or if I want to do something like another book. But we'll see. Either way, I want to put a lot of effort and a lot of energy into it, so it probably won't be ready for a while. But I'll be making a post about it soon on Instagram, and I'll share a link to the outline so you can check it out and see and make any suggestions, because I'm still in the early stages. I want to know what it is you all want to know, basically. If you were just starting out as a composer, if you are a seasoned composer, wherever you are in your journey, I want to find out what the kind of things you wish you had known when you first started out, the things that you wish you knew right now if you are just starting out, all kinds of things. So, like I said, I want to make a de facto go-to manual for anyone who wants to learn how to write music. Yeah, basically just kind of continuing on the work I do here on YouTube. Anyways, let's see here. Let's continue. I'm going to move this off to the side. You should have had plenty of time to take notes if you wanted. Let's start with the bass drum here. Actually, no, let's go with the timpani. The timpani has a bit of let's see. So I use symphonic percussion by Spitfire. It has a great selection. And there we are. I mean, it's got its ups and downs, as all sound libraries do, but I really like this one. Until the day comes where I'm able to get my hands on some nice instruments and make my own percussion libraries, these are going to work really well. So first things first, I need to look over here. I need to see which keys do which. So the 2 is the hit. E2 is soft hit. And then muted hit is G2. So there we go. So like basically a C major chord starting in octave 2 are my 3 that I'm going to focus the most on. If I go to C sharp 3, we've got a roll. Now, I will say, Spitfire does have 2 options. It has a roll. I like to use that one instead because the other one, swell, let's see, just go down. You click it, and it keeps going, keeps going, keeps going, keeps going, keeps going, until it just reaches a natural stopping point. So there are 2 trains of thought here for working with bass drums and samples like this. The first one is to use the swell, because it has that nice recorded ending. Just hit it, find out how long it goes, time the ending of it to the moment where you want it to arrive, and then you basically use a volume fader to fade in at it so it's where the noise doesn't start until you need it to start. I prefer to use rolls because then I can use the dynamics and expression over here. I've got my faders that I'm working with to kind of control it myself. So, but that's just kind of the way of thinking at the moment. For now, let's start with a hit. Let's listen to this first introduction real quick and see where a good bass drum hit might work. All right, so nothing jumped out to me first. Why did I add the bass drum to the timpani? All right. Let's see here. But so nothing stuck out to me immediately as needing a hit in that intro, but I did get a feeling that I really wanted to add I do want to add a swell right at the ending here. All right, so let's try that real quick. Actually, let's just start here. We will turn off the loop, get my faders ready, and let's try recording for a bit. Nice. All right, and I think I want something similar on a cymbal. All right, so cymbal again. Those 3 common rolls for the cymbals, especially in orchestral music: rolls and crescendos, accents, and special effects from scraping or bowing. Right now, I'm really feeling just kind of that roll, that crescendo. So if I am going to go with a roll, what I want is a suspended cymbal, not a crash cymbal. That's one thing I'm a little bummed about. Spitfire doesn't differentiate between suspended and crash cymbals here. Let's just try the medium cymbal is typically what I work with. Let's see here. So it looks like hit is C2, D2 is a choked hit, E2 is a brush, C3 is still a roll. All right. All right, so there we go. We've got our roll. I've got my dynamics and expression faders ready to go. Let's record one real quick. There we go. All right, so we got a nice cymbal. We've got a bass drum. Don't think I'm going to introduce the timpanis until we get kind of a more of a climactic moment. That's when I like to use the timpanis the most, is when you've got a big climactic arrival and boom, the timpani arrives on the bass line. All right, it's hitting the strongest notes. It's providing a quick attack, a big booming presence to everything. So yeah, I think I will save that. I am just going to exit out of this because it's distracting me on the side. So we've got that. Let's move on to section A1. We'll listen to the intro again, but we'll see if anything sticks out right off the bat from cymbal, bass drum, or timpani using, and I just closed it. Of course I did. Any of these, no, not project setup. No, bad, there it is. Any of these rolls that I was talking about. Oh no, please don't crash. I'd be mega bummed out if this crashed. There we go. All right. Let's see. Did it not save it? Oh no, I must have just not put it at the top. All right. Here it is right here. All right. So yeah, looking for any of these 3 roles that I was talking about. If you are just joining the chat, thank you. Welcome. Glad to have you here. As always, please feel free to submit any questions, comments, suggestions, theories, anything in the comments. All right. Let's listen to the intro real quick and go into section A1. So right off the bat, I'm feeling some nice strong hits on the bass drum. Nothing too loud. So nothing that big. Maybe E2. There we go. Kind of like the big, like the subtle kind of booming, resonant sound. So let's record this again. Let's go through, and on each of the moments, I'm just gonna follow what feels natural. All right. Let me minimize all my controller windows. All right, and let me get this up, and let's try. So these popped up. Let's move this one. This one was a bit late. Let's do that again. Let's put another one right here. There we go. I kind of like that. It's a subtle effect. Like I said, if I want to bring it out more, I can later once I'm doing the balancing for the premix. But for now, I think I like just the general idea I have there. Let's listen to this section again, this time thinking of the cymbals. Nothing really came to mind. That's all right. The cymbals are one of those sounds where you want to be careful of not overusing it. They have a very... It's like one of the earliest pieces of advice I had about writing for percussion was from a composer I deeply respect, and he said that all percussion instruments can be organized into 2... Sorry, I keep smacking my mic. All percussion instruments can be separated into 2 categories. The instruments that you get sick of very quickly, and the instruments that you don't get sick of very quickly. And cymbals. Cymbals are very much one of those instruments that you get sick of very quickly. If you have too much of it, it becomes very brash, very in your face, and very annoying. So I'm going to just be kind of subtle with that. Let's move on to section A2 and listen to this real quick. All right, so one thing that's annoying me about my music already, maybe I've just listened to it too many times, but I don't hear a lot of difference between these sections. I don't hear a lot of contrast. Sure, the horn is playing the melody in A1, and then the strings take over in A2, and then we get the flutes are joining in. I've got my 3 flute libraries going and playing the ostinato as well. But other than that, there's really not a lot of difference. So I want to change that. That was actually something I've been wanting to do for a little while. And I think a very simple way, that's why I was saving it for this, is to add a percussion instrument and have them doubling the ostinato. And for this, I can think of very few instruments that are better suited than the snare drum. So where's my snare drum? Do they not have a dedicated snare drum? Huh, that's unfortunate. Let me see here. Bass drum, gong drum, tom ensemble. Drums high, bongos, congas. Ah, there we are. I was going to say, I swear, they've got 3 snares. Good. All right, so let's see what the options are. All right, so C3 sounds like a strong hit. Let's see, C2. Okay, so C2 is what I'm looking for. So what we're going to do is we are going to very quickly just pop that in. And that didn't work for some reason. Let's see here. All right, so measure 17 is where section B starts, or A2. All right, here we go. Going to just take C2, mark it out like that. We're going to go to eighth notes. We're going to switch to the cutting tool, the snipper. We're going to zoom in, hit the Alt button, and boom, snips everything for us. Let's see here, and let's lower the entire thing just a little bit, velocity-wise. And then let's bring up one of the flutes, shall we? To find out where were those accents that we were working with. I want to highlight the same accents. So we had G at the down. Then we had measure beat 4. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. And then it was, I'm going too fast. All right, so 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. All right, so this is our pattern. We went 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. All right, so we're going to just raise those up a bit so I can see visually. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Just gonna copy this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, we're going to raise all of these up. We're going to double check. Make sure that this still works with the ostinato. All right, excellent. I am realizing, though, that this was supposed to be 16th notes. So let's just painstakingly go through and do all this. This would be a great moment for any questions, any comments, anything, really. Because we're going to start getting into some, again, fairly nitty-gritty kind of boring stuff going on. But, yeah. So I guess while I'm doing this, I can talk about the percussion and a general approach you can take to your own music. It's very helpful to start out, like I did, with a small selection of instruments that you know you're going to use, all right? Like I said, my 3 go-to are bass drum, timpani, cymbals, all right? Typically suspended cymbals, sometimes crash. Spitfire doesn't really mark theirs as any different. This is going to get annoying. But then, yeah, basically I shared some of the most common techniques that those 3 instruments will work with. But here we've got these 7 traditional roles of the percussion family. We have doubling for color, ostinati, extreme dynamics, solo statements, harmonic support, builds and climaxes, and highlighting accents. I remember it through the acronym, I think it's called an acronym, DOES HBH. And very frequently what I'll do is I'll go through each of my selected instruments that I know I want to use, and I'll go through the entire piece just listening with one goal in mind. So for example, I'll go through and I'll think, all right, I'm going to listen to the music. Where do I think percussion instruments could be added to double for color? And I'll listen to the whole thing. All right, and I'll just take notes. I'll put some instruments here and there that I think are good for doubling for color. I'll go through again. I'll do something like I'm doing with the snare drum now. I'll go through and say, like, all right, where can the instruments double down on the ostinati that are present in the music, or the rhythmic figures, the repetitive rhythmic figures that's what an ostinato is, and where can I apply those? So there's all kinds of different. I'll just go down through the list. I'll figure out which instruments I want to use, how I want to use them, and where I want to use them. And sometimes, oh, that sucks. Oh, I misclicked and now they're all unhighlighted. All right, you know what? I'm going to, here's what I'm going to do, because that's getting annoying. I'm going to mute the snare drum so we don't hear it every time I click it. And I keep forgetting I can, no, that's solo, not mute. All right, so, but yeah, and every once in a while you have different ideas that come to your mind like this, out of order. And if it comes out of order, go for it. Take a crack at it, try out the idea, and then after that, just return to the method of going through and finding all the different roles and the different instruments that you are working with. One thing I will say, percussion instruments, as with the woodwind family, are very much a only use what you need type family. Really, every instrument other than the strings is use only what you need and nothing more than that, because it can quickly be overdone. All right, so I've got these highlighted. I've got it all figured out. Let's listen to this real quick again just to make sure it matches up with our ostinato. All right, yeah, so it works. One thing now is we got to humanize it a bit. No, not the flutes, snare drums. Flutes were already humanized. So you'll look right here at the velocity. All right, everything is identical. All the accents are the same. All the non-accented notes are the same velocity, which is how hard the note is hit. If we look even closer, everything is exactly on beat. Everything is exactly uniform, and that's impossible. No matter how good you are as a percussionist, it is impossible and not really desirable to get complete machine accuracy. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the Logic editor, open up on my other screen, and I'm going to use a couple of factors, presets that I have created. Every DAW has a randomizer. All right, in Cubase it's the Logic editor. I can't remember what it is in Logic or Pro Tools. But so first thing I'll do is I'll add 6% variability to the velocity. All right, so I've got it set up here. What this is going to do, I'm going to hit apply. All the notes I've highlighted, you'll notice the velocity right here is going to suddenly be randomized. Boom, all right? A lot more variety, all right? Makes it sound more human. Next, what I'm going to do is, just because I want to make sure I don't have any more issues, I'm going to separate each of these by 10 ticks, all right? All right, so these are all shortened by 2% of a beat. In Cubase, about 5 ticks is 1% of a beat. Technically 4.8, but you can round up for small things like this. All right, so I've cut it off. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is start point variability. All right, so I'm going to tell Cubase, take every single one of these notes and randomly move it anywhere from 2 ticks ahead of where it is now, so very, very subtle, or 4 ticks after where it's at. Again, super, super subtle, but it goes a very long way into making this sound a lot more human. If we zoom in, you'll notice they're not all perfectly in sync with the tick, all right? This one's a little before the beat, this one's a little before is after, this one's a little after, that one seems a bit closer to it. This adds a lot more humanized feel to it. And then one of the last steps we'll do in the pre-mixing process, after we've added all this percussion, is we're going to add a humanized approach to the tempo. All right, I'm going to show you in Cubase at least how to kind of conduct your own music by tapping a beat or any kind of measure or whatever rate you want to do, and then telling Cubase, all right, take this information and create a tempo map. All right, and so if we've got, like, what do we got here? We've got 95 beats per minute. All right, that'll be, when we're done humanizing the tempo, we'll get somewhere around there. But we won't get there, like, it'll be a lot more variability. Some measures will be 97 beats per measure. Other minute. Others will be like 92. There'll be a lot more variability. It'll still feel like it's relatively solid, but it'll sound more human. And it goes a very, very long way to make your music sound more realistic. So those are some great percussion hacks, a little bit of a tempo hack. Let's listen to this real quick. Let's make sure that the snare drum works. All right, so it's a little short. We can lengthen it. I'll lengthen it later. We can move on from now. And it's also not very balanced. The snare drum is very strong, very prominent here. I will typically get an approximate balance, which is what I've been doing this entire time. Just get things a little, like, somewhat balanced. And then in the pre-mixing phase, like just before I start mixing, that's when I'll go through and really make sure everything is properly balanced. All right. Hi, I am from Ukraine, so sorry for my English. How to recognize a musical phrase and melody? I watched your videos about melody, but I really hard phrasing. But thanks for your works on YouTube. Awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad you're able to watch my videos. Very sorry about what's going on in the Ukraine. I can't imagine what that is but I imagine that's not why you're here. You don't need any more reminders of that, so let me see if I can tackle this question. How to recognize a musical phrase in a melody. I watch your videos about melody, but I really hard phrasing. Big thanks for your work. Okay, so phrasing is kind of something where you need a little bit of an ear for it. And the more you listen to music, the more you can kind of get a knack for it. Now, I will say phrasing as a tool is more useful for composing as an idea. All right, so your phrasing is going to be whatever you decide it to be. You can be 4 measures, 8 measures, whatever. Here, I believe we are working with 8 bar phrases. All right, so let's listen to the melody real quick. We are going to, I'll mute the horn solo. And that's not working for some reason. There we go. All right, let's start over. So that's one phrase. And how we know it's a phrase is it sounds, at least to some level, complete. All right, that was a sentence. That was an idea that got stated. And now it's either going to get repeated like it does in this music, or it doesn't. Now, something I will say, I'm sorry, I keep smacking my table. It's a very flimsy table, and I keep shaking the camera, so I'm sorry about that. But with phrasing, using it as a tool for composing, I'd say the most usefulness you get out of it is as a systematic approach to writing. All right, so if you decide that you want to write a 4-bar phrase or an 8-bar phrase, all right, from what you learned in the melody series, you know that every phrase needs an introduction where you establish the idea. It has a local climax if it's monomotivic, which most phrases are. It's going to have a moment where it reaches some all-time high or all-time low energy for that phrase. And then it has an ending of some sort. So as a composer, all you need to know at that point is you've decided on an 8-bar phrase. All right? You know at the very beginning of the 8-bar phrase, you have to have your introduction. You need to establish the idea you're working with. At the very end of those 8 bars, you need to end the phrase. And throughout there, there's a lot of variability you can do. The series talks about it with writing melodies. But in terms of listening, it suddenly doesn't become all that necessary. You don't need to listen to someone else's music and be able to tell exactly where the phrases are. It's really about where do you feel that the music can be broken up into different sections. It's a lot like time signature. Lots of people will argue about what time signature a piece of music is in, and the answer really is it doesn't matter. Whatever time signature makes it easiest for you to keep track. And that's what I'd say about phrasing in this kind of long, rambling way, is that however long your phrases are, it's up to you. It's like, how long do you want it to be? How long do you think does it make sense? I think this phrase might actually be like a 9-bar phrase. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, so it's like it's an 8-bar phrase, but it bleeds into the 9th measure. But so we have basically a thematic statement. And then we have another thematic statement made by two different phrases. Each one is a phrase using with the same material. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not. I hope that makes sense. So let me revisit your question. How do you recognize a musical phrase and melody? Or watch your videos about melody? All right, yeah, so I'd say a really good practice for recognizing phrases in other music is to really just kind of go through and decide, all right, where do you feel like it naturally breaks up? Don't worry about whether you're getting it right or not. All right, just where does it feel like it naturally sections into to you? All right, so here, for whatever reason, my markers are always off for some reason. They're never at the start of the phrase or whatever for this project. It's the only project that's giving me issues with that. But yeah, just if you listen to music, take notes about, all right, where does it sound like a new idea is starting or an old idea is being revisited or reestablished. I hope that helps. I really hope it does. If not, let me know. I'll see if I can find something a little clearer. But I hope the series continues to be helpful for you. I hope that it's I hope it continues to be helpful. All right. As always, I really appreciate your answer. That was helpful. Oh, great. Thank you so much. I can never tell if I'm being helpful with these live things or not. All right. Because at least when I'm working on actual videos, I'll spend a week writing the script or something. So I'll write it, I'll revisit. And so I'll make sure that I think it's pretty helpful. But when it's live, it's just me. I'm just out here. So I'm just rambling. So I'm glad it's helpful. All right, where was I? All right, we had the snare drum. All right, so we've done cymbal, we've done snare drum. Wow, all right, it is almost an hour. So let's quickly jump ahead and go to the one spot where I know I wanted a timpani. So we talked about how coming back to theme A after the B section, how it has a very lackluster arrival. And I think it's just because of the balance. The bass line doesn't come in nearly as powerful. The brass instruments don't come in nearly as powerful as I would like them to. And I can fix that when I'm working on the balance for the pre-mixing, which should be next episode. And yeah, so let's go through, but let's see if we can address a little bit of that right now. Yeah, see, that's a very lackluster things, and we'll fix it. This is all a sketching process. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the tuba. I'm going to expand that. What measure do we start on? We start on measure 39. That's where the key signature, or the time signature switches. Let's grab that. Then around, I'd say probably steps around here. This is where it looks like it. No, one second. Let's just listen to it. Oops, did you see that? All right. When I cut it, that note disappears. What ends up happening is this note right here that we are on. It's humanized. So notice how it starts just before the downbeat. This is one I think I actually played this bass line myself. So it gets a bit tricky. So I can't cut it. So we'll just copy and paste this to find out where the looping point is. All right, there we go. I'm going to copy that, and we're just going to slap it in the timpani. Let's see if this works. All right. Of course that's not working. I haven't loaded the timpani. Duh. All right. So we are rapidly wrapping things up. Once we got the timpani in, after this video, I've shared my approach to percussion. This series has taken way too long. I don't think I've ever spent this much time on a single piece before. I've never spent as much fragmented time on a piece like this before either. But I'm going to, after that, I'm going to apply all the percussion myself. All right, I'm going to do the rest of it so I can do it at my own pace. You know my process now. I've got 7 traditional rolls with percussion instruments. I go through each one. Sometimes it's helpful to have a selection of instruments ahead of time that I know I'm going to use. But then sometimes it's fun just to add stuff spontaneously as well. But yeah, go through those 7 rolls. Doubling for color, ostinato, extreme dynamic, solo statements, harmonic support, builds and climaxes, and highlighting accents. Remember, you can remember this by does HBH. That's how I remember it, at least. It takes a lot of the mystery, a lot of the fear and intimidation out of writing for percussion instruments. But let's try this out real quick. And of course, percussion is muted. Uh-oh, something's not working. It's too low for the timpani. That's something else I didn't check. All right, so the timpani typically has a range of around C2, which is low C, to C4, which is middle C. In Cubase, however, in most DAWs, middle C is C3. So we want to keep it above. No, it is. So why is it giving us trouble? Let's still raise it an octave. All right, so for whatever reason, it's... All right, so there we go. Let's see if I can remember the individual ranges of each instrument, because the last thing I want to cover with you on percussion is writing for timpani. All right, so the timpani has about, at maximum, about 5 drums. All right, and it'll differ from each orchestra you're working with. Now, a lot of these rules go out the window if you don't ever anticipate anyone to actually write or to perform your timpani part, but I would still like to, for the timpani, is still share these rules, because you never know. Someone out there might be looking to get their music performed for real. Well, not for real, but by live players. All right, so the range is C2 to C4 across all 5 drums. All right, and so drum... Let's say 5, or the largest drum has a range of around C2, so low C to, I believe, I want to say A3-ish. It might be, it's either A3 or about like F sharp or something. I remember it's either a 4th or a 6th. I'm sorry. It's been a while since I've had to do this strictly from memory. Drum 4, which is the next biggest, is going to be F2 to C3. I do remember that one because that one's a perfect 5th. They're all perfect 5ths except for the first one. Drum 3 goes from about B flat to F3. Drum 2 goes from about D3 to A4. And drum 1, the smallest and highest one, goes from F3 to C4. Remembering C2 is low C and C4 is middle C. Now here's the tricky part. Timpanis, depending on the player you're working with, cannot switch notes very quickly. Certainly if you're trying to write idiomatically for the timpani. For basically any given phrase, you want to stick to just one note per drum. And this is why the timpani typically plays a simplified version of the bass drum. So now the next thing we would have to do is go through each of these notes and find out, all right, which one is this going to work with? So this would be E3 technically, because Cubase does everything a note lower. So we'd find out, all right, which drum can play E3. Drum 2 can play E3, assuming we have all 5 drums. All right, so that'd be D, E3. So then drum 2 is out of the picture. All right, it's playing the E. Then G2, which drum can play technically G3. All right. The only one that can play G3 is going to be drum 2. So maybe we give that one to the G instead, and drum 3 does E2. So you can see there's going to be some problem solving involved. You want to find out what notes in the bass line are the most important, and how can I assign how can I take the 5 maximum drums I typically get to work with in timpani? And lots of orchestras have fewer than 5. But how do you take the number of drums you have available, given their individual preferred ranges, and figure out which notes to assign to which drum? So it does take some problem solving. I'll go through this at a later time because it is a little bit, again, a little dry, a little complicated. I will be addressing this in future material on orchestration, which brings me back. I'm going to talk about the announcement one last time, just because there weren't too many people on earlier. But I have another project, and I could really use your feedback on it. All right. Okay. Oh, 1 second. Will one player cover all 5 drums, or do other players cover? Great, fantastic question. One player. This is typically why the timpani player is just that, a timpani player, all right? Like I said, it's considered very, very poor manners to assume that the timpani player is going to play any percussion instruments other than timpani. That's why if you ever do a competition or you are lucky enough to get commissioned for something, they'll often tell you, all right, we've got a timpani player and 2 percussionists. You should not assume that means you have 3 percussionists. You should assume that means you have 1 timpani player and all they do is play the timpani because it's a very specialized instrument, and you have 2 people that can play all the other percussion instruments. So that's another thing that really limits you as writing for percussion, is you don't want to go crazy because you want to make sure that you can work with an actual effective number of percussionists. And that's about average. 2 to 3 percussionists and a timpani player, which means you can have only 2 to 3 instruments in addition to the timpani playing at a time, unless there's some finagling around, some strategic thinking and whatnot. So in general, though, you want to assume just 1 instrument per time per player. But yeah, so that is something. If you're working with 1 timpani player, they have 1 mallet each hand, so they can play a maximum of 2 notes at one time. All right, and if you want to roll, you have to keep that in mind. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind. But again, it's all a caveat. If you don't have any plans on anyone ever playing this, and you don't care about it sounding quote unquote realistic, go for it. Whatever you want. The computer can play whatever you need it to. All right, it can play fast chromatic pieces, which the regular timpanis can't. They can't play a bunch of notes and that are separated only by half steps on multiple drums. All right, you can do whatever you want as long as it works on your keyboard, as long as it works with your samples. Go for it. These rules don't really apply until you want to start writing for real life players. All right, like I said, I'll go into a lot more detail on future projects when I tackle orchestration, including my new project that I am working on. Let me find it real quick. All right, I keep showing you guys my screen by accident. All right, here we go. All right, so I mentioned this earlier to a couple people that were on, but my new project, and I do need some feedback. I'll be sharing this on Instagram and on YouTube, so I would really appreciate any feedback you have. But I was recently having a conversation with a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine. If you've gotten a copy of my book or if you've seen the video I have on emotions in music, I've mentioned him a couple times. We've known each other all our lives. He's an incredibly, incredibly talented musician. And he also works as a therapist, and that's how he helped with the book and stuff. But he was asking me a question. He's like, all right, if I theoretically wanted to work with someone who had no experience composing, who had no experience with music theory, they were just, let's say they were just like a piano player or a trumpet player or whatever, but they really wanted to learn how to compose, and I had 1 class or 1 book or 1 something to give them, what would it be? And I was kind of talking about how there wasn't really 1 resource out there that I could recommend. There's some great places, like Evident is a great place to get started, but they don't really tackle a lot about music theory. There are lots of great books, but they don't tackle music theory. And I was like, you know what? There isn't really a 1 resource, I think, that could carry it all. And that made me realize I want to do that. I want to be the one to make that resource, because one of my biggest goals is to make music composition more common. All right, one of my biggest goals, one of the biggest reasons why I continue to do all this stuff on YouTube, I want to make it more accessible to more people. And so I took a little bit of time and I brainstormed everything that I would want to teach someone. And I mentioned earlier, I split it into 3 parts for like a single book or an online class. I don't know what it's going to be yet. But basically, part 1 focuses on what I think is the most important music theory. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but like music theory, you don't need it. You do not need music theory to write music. You don't. But it makes it a lot easier. Like the example I used earlier, I think, was it's like trying to write a poem in a language that you don't speak. You can do it. I have no doubt in my mind that you could do it. You could use Google to figure out words. You could talk to someone who does know a lot more about the language. There's lots of ways you could do it. But if you know the language, writing your poem is going to be so much easier. You're going to have so many more options available to you because you know what you want to convey. And now you have all these tools available to you. You have all these words, all this knowledge, all this understanding available to you to help convey those words. And music theory is a lot, very, very similar. It's not necessary, but it makes things so much easier. If you have an emotion, if you have a story you want to tell, and you have a strong understanding of music theory, it makes it a lot easier. So part 1 is focused on the most essential music theory that I think everyone should know who wants to start composing. Part 2 goes a lot more into the actual trade of composing. All right, and then part 3 focuses on orchestration and how just like an approach to arranging your music. I use the orchestra as the default, but really you can apply the principles that I cover in any genre of music. So this is where I need your help. All right, so right now I have gone through, and I think it's like a 6 or 7 page document, and I have outlined every chapter or lesson or whatever this is going to end up being into what I want to teach in each one. All right. And I could really use some help if you want. I'm going to share this after the video is live. I'm going to upload it into the description of this video. I'm going to upload it to Instagram later in the week, as well as I'm probably going to make a separate YouTube video announcing this as well. I wanted to share with all of you first, though, because you're always the ones who are on the live chats, and it's always fun to share stuff with you guys. But I could use some feedback. Is there anything you think is missing? Anything you really wish you could learn? Or if you're an experienced composer, is there something here that you really wish you had learned sooner and that you think I should include in the book? All kinds of cool stuff. And then lastly, I'm trying to figure out whether I want to do this as a book or as an online class. Either way, I want to make sure it's high quality. I want to get it edited. I want to get it checked out. I want to make sure this is the best resource I can possibly put together so that as many people as possibly can benefit from it. So if you get the chance, if you are excited, if you're interested, please go through the description after this video is done. Check out this outline. Give me some feedback, some ideas, some encouragement, anything, really, criticism, really anything you want to offer. And then also let me know, would you rather see this as a book that you can carry around with you, that you can study at your own time, or as an online class that you can sit through some videos and some samples and do some homework assignments or whatever? I welcome all kinds of feedback. So with that, we have just a few more minutes. If you have any questions, any comments, suggestions, theories, recommendations, anything, all right, I'll stay on for a little bit long. Shoot them my way. I'll stay on for a little bit longer. All right, one thing I'll say is you can kind of see my background as a teacher. I worked as a instructor all through grad school. That's how I paid for school. I've got my terminal objectives, all my lesson planning and stuff I take to this. It's nice. I like having a little bit of structure. All right, so will one player call? Oh, yep, that's the same question about the drums earlier. All right, you know what, here, instead of me just sitting here awkwardly, let's listen to a little bit of the music again, shall we? We'll do that, and then by the time it's done, if I don't have any more questions, I'll call it. All right? Oops, I only have percussion. Let's go to the beginning. That snare drum is really loud. Alright, so the music's acting all glitchy all of a sudden. I don't know why. But I do have a question. Let's see. The project sounds interesting. With either, would you have a guided exercise in the book? Yes, exactly. There would be exercises at the end of every chapter There would be recommendations at the end for continued learning. So it's like a list of my favorite books, a list of my favorite YouTubers, online classes that I've taken that I've really learned a lot from. But yeah, the whole point of this entire project is I kind of want it to be like a one-stop thing. Of course, I hope no one treats it as the only stop they take. But I want it to be a kind of thing where if you get this resource and you have no idea how to write music, by the time you're done going through it, you have the experience and knowledge to start writing whatever music you want, in terms of like at least to start working on it, learning how kind of thing. So yeah, there would be exercises that you could do to apply the reharmonization techniques I'll be discussing. There'll be exercises to try and take the different melody writing techniques I'll be teaching. Exercises to just kind of like sharpen your theory, anything and everything. There is going to be, I would say, two primary focuses from a theoretical lens for this project are going to be harmony and orchestration. I've said this in a few of my videos, and I've said it to every single student I work with. Harmony and orchestration, in my opinion, are the two most important tool sets that a composer can really hone. Melody writing is awesome, and it's also very important. But in my experience, if you are very talented with harmony, you can make a simpler melody sound so much better, so much more awesome. If you are good at writing a good harmony, chances are you're probably really good at writing a good melody. If you can come up with a good, nice chord progression that tells your story without a melody, writing the melody from that chord progression is a very simple matter. So yes, long, rambling answer made short. Yes, there are going to be exercises. There are going to be assignments, everything and anything that you can, no matter what the format, if it's a book or a class. All right. So yeah, I think with that it is officially past 4:30. I'm going to call it today. I hope you learned something. I hope you're feeling excited about writing percussion. Next video, I'm going to go through, I'm going to finish the percussion on my own so we don't end up dragging this into another 5 episodes worth. And yeah, so the next episode, we will be going over my pre-mixing process. We're going to go how to use stereo imaging and panning to make sure every instrument has its own space on the digital stage. We'll discuss using delay to create kind of a 3-dimensional model for each instrument and kind of balancing it as well. All right. Making sure that everything fits into place. Because from here, I'm basically going to split each track into multiple pieces, whether it's accompaniment or melody. And I'm going to rearrange these on the side into folders of which is the melody, which is the chords, which is the bass line, stuff like that. Makes it a lot easier to balance. All right, so with that, have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody, a wonderful weekend. Thank you to everyone who's able to stop by. Keep studying, keep working hard, and keep writing new music, my friends. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye. And end.